How was God's providence at work in David's life in 1 Samuel 23? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Samuel on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 1 Samuel chapter 23, verses 14 to 29. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 14. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Samuel chapter 23, beginning at verse 14. And David stayed in the strongholds in the wilderness and remained in the mountains of the wilderness of Ziph. Saul sought him every day, but God did not deliver him into his hand. So David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in a forest. Then Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David in the woods and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, "Do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Even my father Saul knows that." So the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. And David stayed in the woods, and Jonathan went to his own house. Then the Ziphites came up to Saul at Gibeah, saying, "Is David not hiding with us in the strongholds in the woods, in the hill of Hachilah, which is on the south of Jeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of your soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand." And Saul said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, for you have compassion on me. Please go and find out for sure, and see the place where his hideout is, and who has seen him there, for I am told he is very crafty. See therefore, and take knowledge of all the lurking places where he hides, and come back to me with certainty, and I will go with you. And it shall be, if he is in the land, that I will search for him throughout all the clans of Judah." So they arose and went to Ziph before Saul. But David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the plain on the south of Jeshimon. When Saul and his men went to seek him, they told David. Therefore he went down to the rock and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. And when Saul heard that, he pursued David into the wilderness of Maon. Then Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. So David made haste to get away from Saul, for Saul and his men were encircling David and his men to take them. But a messenger came to Saul, saying, "Hurry and come, for the Philistines have invaded the land." Therefore Saul returned from pursuing David, and went against the Philistines. So they called that place the Rock of Escape. Then David went up from there and dwelt in the strongholds of En-gedi. David has been on the run from Saul. He started at Ramah, then went to Nob before coming down to Gath of the Philistines. Fearing for his life, he fled Gath, and on his way picked up a following of about 400 men, including his family. David continued to travel east, coming to Moab, and while he left his parents there, David and his men returned to Judah at the command of the Lord. They rescued Keilah at the beginning of the chapter, but had to leave the area after word came to them that Saul was coming, and that if they remained, the people of Keilah would hand David over to Saul. Remaining in southern Judah, they came to the wilderness of Ziph. On the screen now is the landscape of this region, and as you can see, it is quite hilly, making it a great place to hide, as it would be difficult to find people there. But David was traveling with now 600 men, and so being inconspicuous was rather difficult, even in the wilderness, for when you came to settlements, like the ones in Ziph, you would be noticed. Jonathan had gotten wind of where David was, and so he came to David to encourage him. Jonathan proclaimed that he knew that his father wouldn't catch David, and that David would be king, stating that even his father now knows that. What would give Jonathan such confidence? Jonathan's faith in God. Jonathan had seen the actions of David and how God was with David and against his father. And so, this faith led Jonathan to know that God wouldn't abandon David nor let his father succeed. But just because Jonathan had faith in God didn't mean that he knew exactly how the future would go, for in telling David that he would be king, Jonathan fully expected to be standing beside David in that kingdom. Jonathan was a righteous man, and David had made a covenant with him not to harm Jonathan or his household, So why wouldn't Jonathan expect to be alongside David? But alas, we know that's not going to be the case, as Jonathan will die in battle at the hands of the Philistines at the end of the book. That doesn't mean that Jonathan wasn't righteous. It just teaches us that the ways of this world, death, come to even the righteous, no matter our plans. Jonathan and David make yet another covenant due to their friendship, and Jonathan returns to his house while David remains in the forest. This is the last time we have recorded in this book that David and Jonathan meet, though that doesn't preclude other unrecorded meetings. Meanwhile, the Ziphites come to Saul with some intelligence, the location of David and his men among them in Ziph. Saul is very pleased with these people for having shown him compassion by giving them this information. How pitiful Saul has become. He plays the victim here as if David has done him some great wrong, and worse, that the Lord had done him some great wrong. Saul's sin led him away from God and rent the kingdom from him. David was anointed by God because David was a man after God's own heart. Saul is not a victim here, but alas, men and women often play the victim in order to seek the sympathies of others, even if those sympathies are undeserved. Saul tells the Ziphites to go and scout out exactly where David is, for David had been successful in evading him in the past. And as it was, David had moved again further south of Ziph to the wilderness of Maon, which was not too far from Ziph itself. The wilderness of Maon, especially as you come towards the west coast of the Dead Sea, can be quite rugged. Saul's contingent of men caught wind of where David and his men were in the wilderness, and at one point were so close that Saul was on one side of a mountain with David on the other side of the mountain. We don't know exactly where this was, but this picture gives you an idea of the landscape we're talking about. Saul's men would have successfully encircled David, cutting off any means of escape, except that word came to Saul that the Philistines had attacked, and he would be needed to go and fight them off. In this, we see the providence of the Lord at work. The Lord could have protected David in any way he chose, and so he chose this way, getting Saul preoccupied with the Philistines, allowing David and his men not only room to escape, but a chance to regroup as well. David called this place the Rock of Escape, for it was there that he escaped from Saul. From there, David went up and dwelt in the strongholds at En-gedi, next to the Dead Sea, while Saul went to fight the Philistines. The chase, of course, is not over. We'll take up with that, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 1 to 7, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.